To those of you just joining, thanks. We're just going to wait a few minutes here, let people hop on, and that way we don't start too early. So, but thanks for joining. See what we got here. I will have the live chat up if you guys have any questions for those of you that are on. Just give me a moment to pull that up too. Here, let people hop on, and that way we don't start too early. So, but thanks for joining. See what we got here. Now there will be a lag as well. It's probably about a 30-second delay. I will have the live chat up if you guys have any questions for those of you. But if you haven't noticed already, I have the window up. I don't know what it looks like on mobile, so can't help you there on the chat feature. But if you look there, if you're using a browser and a PC or Mac, you can see right there, there's a chat field if you guys have any questions. But again, we're going to wait about another 5 minutes before we get started. Just in the event people are having a hard time loading in, I know I've got at least 50 plus that were asking details on tonight's chat. So looks like we've got about 20 right now. But about 5 minutes, we'll get started. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, no, I know. I'll end up popping it out. Good suggestion. See? You guys are so helpful. And it's going to stay right above my head here because I'll bring all the slides and whatnot. Yep. Thanks, Cripples. Appreciate that. Steven, no problem, man. We'll do this while we're waiting. I started this on my own page on Facebook for several years back. I think a couple of years before Snowmageddon, 2010, so around 2008, and it was a lot of fun for me. I've always done this as a hobby. Never really imagined having my own page or running it, having as many inquiries as I get on a daily basis. But, it's fun for me. So no problem. This is something I enjoy doing, and hopefully it helps some people understand what the heck's going on and, why certain meteorologists continue to swing and a miss and whiff. But I think showing you tonight, especially with this event coming up on the 22nd, it'll really get into just how crazy of event and how dynamic they are, right? So I'm hoping we get to the point where that's pretty apparent and how hard it is to be a meteorologist. And I'm not one. Make sure we understand that off the bat. I mentioned this is a hobby for me. So, but at the same time, I'm accessing the same data that these guys are. And in some cases, I think a little less bias because they definitely have their own biases if working with certain software and models their whole career. So. All right. So real quick before we get started here. All right, so what we're going to start off with, guys. First off, thanks for joining. If you have followed me since I started the page 2 years ago, thank you very much for being on. For those of you that might even be new today following me, again, thank you very much for coming on and taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk to a microphone about weather, which is quite a niche for those of you. So without any further ado, let's get into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to access some models for you guys. It's going to go anywhere from the Euro that we saw come out today, 12Z. It will also show the GFS model and some of its ensembles. We'll also get into sea surface temperatures, SSTs, and QPF, quantitative precipitation, that will be forecasted so far per models. We'll have that slide as well. And then we're also going to have some interesting data in terms of the cold air that everyone's worried about. I know there were some discussions on my page before about, last time I looked at the forecast, it showed that, it's going to be 40 degrees on Friday, right? And we'll get into that a little bit. But first, we'll start off with, I think, the most significant, and we'll jump into it right here. So this right here is your Euro model, right? And let me move the chat over here a little bit so you can get a better view, so I can kind of zoom in. So here you see we have pretty high number that pops up. And look, trust me, I've seen about 1,000 of these just today and posted across social media. So when you see this map, it's definitely interesting because it brings you back to, wow, that means we're going to get 21, 20, 19 inches of snow. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for, right? Although it is suggesting that, and we are within that 5-day mark now when this storm would make its way through. That's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a trend versus previous operational runs. So when you look at this, the jackpot, if you will, or the bullseye of the storm, has been centering itself around that southern PA, western Maryland, and northern Virginia area. And it's been really consistent as well right around here in the Fredericksburg area. So right off the bat, the Euro, which again has had 2 runs since the run last night when I first posted about the Euro, it's been saying the same thing in those 2 runs. So again, it's about trends, it's about consistency, and this is showing you right off the bat that, look, this is not something to overlook. We're within that 5-day window. We're not talking about 10 days out. This is something that should at least be put right up there as far as something to look out for. So next, I want to show you guys. Actually, I believe this is the same slide, just zoomed in a little bit. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So next we've got the GFS, right? So although the GFS is, it takes its licks, I will tell you that quite often in the last, I would say 10 months, it has been pretty darn accurate, if not just a step or 2 behind the Euro in terms of accuracy. And just 2 runs ago, it did not have this level of snow output. I can tell you that. It had some of these shades area here. You see that's about around 7 inches there. It had that spread out here in western Loudoun County, all throughout Western Virginia into West Virginia, it didn't have anything in that 15 range. All of a sudden now, it's starting to see that same signal that the Euro's been picking up now for 2 operational runs. So already you can see that the GFS is catching up, and that's usually a sign that there's a very strong signal, especially 5 days out, that these are picking up. So this is something to consider too when you're looking at operational forecasts. And then the next thing here I want to show you is this is the amount of moisture we're looking at for this, right? So it's not a heat map. It's, again, it's not quantity of inches by any means. This is, not a quantity of inches for snow, quantity of inches for moisture. And we're looking right here, probably right above where Leesburg is, 2.1, 2.2, 2.1. And if you've ever heard of a moisture to snow ratio, typically it's 10 to 1, 10 inches for every 1 inch of moisture. That would suggest here what we're seeing in the GFS and in the Euro, roughly around 20 inches of snow, give or take. That being said, there are instances where we see 15 to 1 ratios. So for every 1 inch of moisture, you get 15 inches of snow. Obviously, if that were the case, this would be around a 30-inch storm, which, yet to be seen, obviously. We don't want to start talking Snowmageddon numbers yet, but again, this is a real possibility per this model, as it sees a QPF dump right across the DC metro area. So that's definitely something to keep your eyes on as well. And the next thing we'll look at here, actually I'm going to bring you back to this is what I posted earlier today, but there's something I noticed that was pretty interesting. So if you see here, right here in southern Pennsylvania, southwest, it's an absolute monster of a storm. And they're going to get snow either way, right? Because of their temperatures, their elevation. But what I found interesting is in the GFS run that we just looked at, it showed some of these totals and some of the mean runs down here in that West Virginia, far Western Virginia area versus here. So there has been some talk amongst some meteorologists that I've befriended that there is going to be a southern shift in these totals, or a southern shift in this storm, that the center will be more over Western Virginia into West Virginia, right into Northern Virginia. If you looked at that last slide that we were just looking at, when it comes to the moisture, that actually supports that idea, because if I zoom this out, you can see that the GFS is saying, hey, look, I think that the moisture levels up here will be much less than those here centered over DC. So already within what, 12 hours, we have the Euro saying one thing and we have the GFS saying another in terms of where that bullseye will be. My rule of thumb when that happens, obviously, if you follow me enough, is to follow what the Euro is saying. But that being said, I do think there will be more of a southern shift in the model runs as they come, mainly due to the fact that I think this low that I'm going to point out here in a minute on another slide is going to get drawn out more to sea, and that's going to pull some of those heavier bands back in towards Virginia. So again, when I speak that I might come off like I'm speaking in absolutes here, this is purely based on the data that we're looking at, right? I don't know next to Joe Schmo if it's actually going to happen. But again, you can see these models, they're on to something. And whatever it is, it's a very strong signal. So we'll go on here to the next one. And I think this one, to me, is just crazy. Very, very interesting. So this is right here. So this is from a previous storm. And I'm bringing this up because I want to explain what you're looking at and then show you the actual image that correlates to the storm that we're looking at having. If you look here across, you can see there are low pressure centers all over the place, right? That's what generates storms. For those of you that aren't familiar, that's what brings the energy for storms, is low pressure centers. What you're looking at here is a model run. When you see those snow totals that are put out there and you see like an image of what looks like a storm, and just to bring up an example, if I have one, I don't, so never mind. Normally you just see one L, right? One low pressure center. This is the ensemble mean, meaning when a model runs, it runs at least 35 times. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone, if you know better. But this shows you on each run where they had that low pressure center pulling in out over the coast. And in this case, you can see there's a wide spread. It goes all the way up here from, east of Long Island, all the way down here to South Carolina. So it's a pretty wide gradient, and that kind of means that the model isn't really nailed down as to where that low pressure center is going to be for this storm. This particular storm was from last year, 3 days out from the storm, right? So there's some high uncertainty as to what was going to happen. Let me go ahead and show you what that same graph looks like, what same image looks like, that mean for this coming storm. And as you can see already, there's a much tighter gradient. They're really bunched in there right off the East Coast. And this is a classic example of a Miller A, which is typically a major East Coast storm, and or in this case, if the models continue to trend as they are now, a historic East Coast storm. Because you can see these are tightly brought in right over southeastern Virginia, right over North Carolina, right off the Outer Banks. Even the ones that are, I would say, outliers are still pretty close, and they could bring a lot of snow with them, even with this guy out here. But any of these that were to track over the North Carolina, over the Outer Banks, and then right up the Delmarva or up the East Coast, you're looking at a significant storm. So that, again, out of 35 operational runs of the Euro, it's showing a bullseye right here off the Outer Banks, which is a classic setup for a Miller A. And the last thing we're going to take a look at here is something that I don't think a lot of people bring up, but it's very important when it comes to coastal storms, is sea surface temperatures. Now, right now, as it is, and I'm going to zoom out here a little bit because I was just giving a look earlier, you can see that, let me bring up the, there we go. So this, if it were white, like in these areas here that are shaded white, that means that the temperature is as it should be. Not too cold, not too warm, exactly what temperatures should be at that given time of year. Now, if you look, you can see anywhere in red, that means that the waters are warmer than average, what they should be this time of the year. And you can clearly see here that the Atlantic is hot. I mean, look, give you an example here, a little extra credit. This is El Nino at work here. Look how warm it is on the southern coast of Mexico. It's insane. I mean, it literally brings a fire hose of moisture up here, and which is getting dumped across. Hence why we've had a pretty wet winter so far. But you can see here in the excuse me, in the Atlantic, it's no joke. I mean, it's pretty warm, and that's thanks to the Gulf Stream, of course. But it's still very warm, late January, which is very interesting. What does that mean for the storm, though? What does that do for us? Well, first off, if you remember this guy, which we were just talking about, and we're going to bring up two here next to one another so you can kind of see that. Oh, can't really see it. So remember here how tight all of these low pressure centers were and all the ensemble means? Look where they are, right? Right in this area, right here over North Carolina. Look how warm the water is just off the coast, right? It's very, very warm. Now, what's going to happen, which a lot of the ensembles are pointing at, I think the Euro Operational had it best so far. It has this low tracking right off the coast into the Outer Banks, feeding off that moisture and causing phasing. And when a storm phases, it dumps pretty much like a moisture bomb, if you will, off into the coast. That's how we get those really dreary rainy days that it's just driving rain all day. You can't see any sunlight. It feels like it rains for like 2-3 days, right? That is what a coastal storm is, a Miller A in this example. And it's going to be fed by these warm waters, and it's going to track itself right up here and move out this way per the Euro and the GFS. Now, there are some slight variations between both models as to the track of the storm, but I will tell you that the sea surface temperatures, they're not going to change. They haven't changed probably in about 60 days. They've remained here, if not gotten a little warmer, hence why we had that little bonus hurricane out there earlier this week, if you paid attention to the media talking about that. The earliest hurricane in the Atlantic since 1938, which is pretty crazy. So that being said, guys, that is really all I had for you. But I did want to leave it open for questions. There is going to be some lag, right? So you ask the question, I'll get an answer in there for you. But again, thank you for joining. I'm going to leave it open for the Q&A. And again, guys, this can be for your backyard, what you want me to give a slight estimation as to what it could be impact-wise, or even right down to one of the slides I brought up if you want to look at it again, or just questions in general. All right, so Burn the Cripples, which is an awesome name, by the way, asks, it might be a bit early to ask for predictions on what you personally think will happen, but about best worst case? Is there going to be 6 inches for sure at least, or could it go up to 30? All right, so as far as totals right now, again, speaking to my rule, which is the 3-day rule, I'm not going to give totals. I don't want to throw that out there yet. But based on confidence right now as we speak, I have not seen a model consensus between the GFS, Euro, NavGem, UKMet, trying to think of some other ones, the Canadian, the CMC, in a long, long time, if probably since December 2010. December 2009. So as far as snow is concerned, I would say right now, if you're looking at Western Virginia into West Virginia into Western Maryland, I think that's about where the jackpot's going to be pending the cold air. which, by the way, there's one thing I got to bring up with that too that I totally forgot. So thank you for asking this. I think you can expect this going to be at least a 6-inch storm in western Loudoun into West Virginia, at least. At worst, we're looking at a 25 to 30-inch storm. All right, Aaron, what is the likelihood that this will be an all-rain event? I've heard some buzz. Yeah, Aaron, and again, that comes down to the the temperature discussion, which thanks for the lead time into that. I'm going to bring this up real quick. So this right here is basically the temperatures that are predicted for Wednesday, right? I get this off a proprietary site, so I can't really get too deep into the data. But just know that this green to this light shade of like a light green blue is the freezing line for Wednesday. And I can tell you that just 2 or 3 operation runs ago, this freezing line was way up here, probably cross-section through Ohio. So the cold air that everyone thought wasn't going to be around is creeping its way in every model run. So the likelihood of all rain, I don't think so. I think at the very least, this will be a mixed event. At the very, very least, we're looking at 3 inches to 6, but I think we're going to be exceeding that. Right, Stephen. I hope my answer just helps you with that question there. Pretty much the same. I think this is, if I had to put on confidence right now, I lean on 70% all white event versus 30% rain. Rain mix. Oh, Scott. I don't know if she likes me or not. How do I tell? She likes weather and she's down with model runs. She's a winner. And while I've got your guys' attention, before we close this out, one other thing I wanted to bring to light here. This is the GFS, pretty much the surface snowfall map. This would go through the weekend into Saturday night. And if you zoom in here, well, first let me show you the legend here so you can see, anything in like that maroon red is around 22 to 24, and then it goes to a light shade of purple, 24 to 27. And you zoom in, and what do you know? What seems to be the jackpot? Right over Northern Virginia, per this GFS operational. Mind you, the Euro says up here, right? It says Southern PA. That might change tonight at 1 a.m. when it runs. I will definitely be posting that late tonight, tomorrow. But the GFS says it thinks here. So my guess is it's going to be somewhere in between. No problem, Scott. No problem. And also, before I go here, I don't think I'm going to do this on a regular basis. I think this will be more for major snow events. But look, if there's if this is successful and this is something you guys enjoy, leave me a post on my page about it. Send me a message, whatever it is. Let me know if this worked for you. This is something that I think could help people kind of get together how exactly things work behind the scenes for all meteorologists and for hobbyists and enthusiasts alike as well. So, thank you. timing, Stephen. Good question. So the onset of this event, I would say right now is going to be midday or mid-morning Friday. Um, Now, that could change. It could accelerate, which, in terms of impact, if it were to start earlier than later, I think you would see a higher probability of more snow. If this were to slow down, it might miss that window of cold air. So, right now, I'm thinking that the track that it has, which is mid Friday morning, is most likely right now. All right, guys, we'll give it about another couple minutes. Any questions at all, feel free. Again, those of you that are still on, thank you very much for sticking around. I do appreciate all the support, but again, do this as a labor of love. So I do appreciate it. Oh, you're talking about this guy. Yeah. So I call him the puppy because he is pretty small. Um, but it's a great telescope. It's a Nexstar 6 SE, I think, and I don't lead any groups of stargazers. I painfully admit that I rarely use this thing. But I do hope at where we have moved now, it's much darker outside, so I'm hoping to use a little more. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining tonight. It was really cool we could do this. If you haven't already, follow the page, not just a like, but go ahead and follow to get notifications. That'll help you see when I post something. And in a fluid events like this, if you want to be the most well-informed, how you want to know what's going on, that's the best policy. Aaron, I can't control the snow, but as a snow lover myself, I know you teachers. You guys bombard me with more questions than anybody. I have to tell you right now. If you are a teacher, you didn't say that you were, but I'm assuming. But you guys bombard me. It's crazy. I thought it was going to be, people that own plowing businesses or, someone that has to make travel decisions based on the data. No, it's the teachers wanting a day off. So that cracks me up. Mm. All right, guys. So as a recap, the trends, the European model is saying more and more snow each run. That'd be 2 runs in a row that it said the same thing. The GFS is starting to get on board, although be a bit further south, bringing it on board. All of the less let's say, less fortunate models that don't have as is a, you know, intensive of a data center they're running them. Their algorithms are not nearly as complex as the Year or the GFS. All of those smaller models are beginning to see the same thing. So as we make our way through into the week, keep that in mind, because you're going to see swings from everywhere. You're going to see people say all rain. You're going to see some people say 60 inches of snow. Remember, let's entrench ourselves in that idea that it's going to be a 6 to 25 inch event. I know that's a huge swing. Hence why I'm having this whole broadcast. But I showed you the data. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Continue to follow. Thanks again. This is Zcast. You all have a good night.